In this video, I'm going to show you how to place the upper control arm on this Nissan Frontier. Comes with the ball joint already installed in it. Just so you know, you will need an alignment after this procedure is done, so let's get started. Use a 21mm socket, remove all 6 of your lug nuts so we can then remove the wheel. Remove your wheel. When we separate the upper control arm from the knuckle, you want to make sure you don't tilt the knuckle forward too much to separate the inner CV joint on the axle. I will not be taking the axle nut off because we don't have to actually pull this away. When this separates, I'm going to lean it to the side and bungee cord it towards the frame so that it can stay secure. Now there is supposed to be a cotter pin on the upper ball joint here. Mine is completely broken. Looks like somebody's already tried to take this off before, so I'm just going to skip past that step. But if you still have one, remove it. And then use a 22mm socket to remove the mounting nut that clamps on the ball joint stud onto the knuckle. With that off, put it back a couple turns. What this is going to do is when we separate these two, it won't come flying up and the ball or the knuckle won't come forward. Just like I mentioned earlier, you don't want it to come forward too much. Take a hammer, hit the side of the knuckle. That should separate the two. At this point, you should be able to pull down on this control arm, remove the mounting nut. Naturally, it will want to go up, just like this. Let the knuckle tilt to the side, and we'll bungee cord this towards the frame, like I said, so that it can't come forward. With a 19mm socket and wrench, remove the 2 mounting nuts and bolts that hold this control arm onto the frame. I'm going to put my wrench on the bolt head side and the socket on the nut side. There's the mounting nut. If you remove your wrench, hopefully your bolt isn't seized inside that bushing. Pull this back, and there's the bolt. Let's do the same to the other side. There's the mounting nut. In order to remove the rear bolt here for this control arm, we're going to have to remove the steering shaft so we can push it forward, otherwise it's going to hit this boot. Up there, there's a 14mm mounting nut with a stud that comes through that clamps on the steering shaft. We'll have to disconnect that to push the steering shaft forward. Grab a swivel with an extension and a 14mm socket. Break that free. Take that mounting nut off. With that mounting nut off, if you need to turn the steering wheel to get to the bolt, go ahead, and then this pinch bolt should be able to come out, and that would release the steering shaft from the steering column. Wiggle it back and forth. Now keep in mind the steering wheel is going to want to spin. There we go. All right, so with that disconnected, as you can see, the steering wheel is free to spin. It's probably just going to turn about a quarter turn or half a turn, depending on how you had it aimed one way or the other. Remember which way that is so that we can spin it back to reassemble. You don't want to have this make a bunch of different turns. That would destroy your clock spring. At this point, you should be able to push the steering shaft out of the way, lift the control arm up if necessary, and this should give you just enough clearance to get this bolt out, and there's the control arm. Inspect the mounting area to make sure it's in good condition and there's no debris here, which there isn't. So I'm going to slide my control arm in. I have my bolts ready. Obviously I will be starting with the rear one so that I can get this one over with. This is the more difficult one. There we go. Move the control arm around to get everything lined up. The rear bolt is in. I'm going to put in the front one. That way this can stop moving around. go. We'll start the mounting nuts, and I won't tighten them yet. I want to leave this loose, and I want to reconnect the steering shaft after I do this. That way that is out of my way. Let's reconnect the steering shaft, and you're gonna, like I said, want to spin the steering column to get it to line up. And then I'm just kind of squishing them together here. There we go. That's in. I have the bolt ready, and you'll notice that on the shaft that comes down from the vehicle, there's one hole that's larger, one that's smaller. The bolt is going to go through the hole that is larger and into the smaller one. Just like that. Have the mounting nut ready. There we go. Once you get it started, this should get clamped on here. So now, in order to get this tightened, I'm going to have to spin the steering wheel. You can grab the knuckle usually and just give it a twist until that faces down so I can get my socket and extension up here. Once again, 14 millimeter for this. Snug it up. I'm going slow. I don't want to over tighten it because I do want to torque this. It's important that this gets tightened down properly. 20 foot-pounds is the torque for this pinch bolt on the steering shaft. There it is. As I'm torquing it, I was setting the fender liner, so when you are doing this, make sure it's not offsetting the reading of your torque wrench. If you cannot torque this, do your best to tighten it. 20 foot-pounds is not a lot. Just give it a good snug with a decent sized ratchet. Now you want to put the upper control arm at right height or approximately there, which means it can't be sitting down like this or on the knuckle. It needs to be raised up about where it was originally or where it would be if the vehicle was on the ground with the weight of the wheels on it. I'm using this piece of wood just to hold it in place because this is about where I want it to be. You, of course, don't have to be spot on, but you have to be pretty close. So with my bolts started, I'm going to now snug them up. That should lock in the position of the control arm, and then we can torque it. All right, got that nice and snug. Of course, like I said, I will be torquing it, so I'll come back, but at least for now, this is locked in, which means I should be able to remove my piece of wood. That way I can get better access to this side. We'll do the same here. I'll bottom it out and then come in with the torque wrench. The torque for these is 94 foot-pounds. I'll put my torque wrench on this one. If the bolt spins, I'll have to hold it. Here we go. Looks like the bolt stayed, so that's helpful. Let's torque the other one. All right, that one stayed as well. If you can't torque this one because the brake lines are right back here and you can't fit your torque wrench, just do your best to tighten it up. Remove any sort of securing device that you had here. For me, it was the bungee cord. And then bring the knuckle over, stick the ball joint through it. I have to move it around a little. And you're going to want to press this down until you see some threads poking through. Quickly put the mounting nut on. There we go. Perfect. Now you can let go. If you want to keep bottoming it out by hand, you can. But at this point, I'm just going to take my impact, tighten it up. 21 millimeter socket, bottom it out. The torque for this is 58 foot-pounds. If the cotter pin slot, once you're done torquing, does not line up, continue tightening to get it to line up and never loosen. As you can see, it's right in the middle of the two castle nut slots, so we're going to keep going. A little more. A little more. Stick the cotter pin through, and to lock it in, you're going to want to bend it over. Make sure it's out of the way of anything so it doesn't get caught on the wheel or anything like that. That's securely locked in, so let's get the wheel on. Reinstall the wheel, seat it on the hub, and then take all 6 of your lug nuts, thread them on by hand so they don't cross thread. And in a cross pattern, you're going to want to snug them up, and then also in a cross pattern, torque them to 98 foot-pounds. Once again, 98 foot-pounds in a cross pattern. Double check them if you want. And there you have it.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.